Meanwhile, in Russia's Novosibirsk, a defense industry plant is on fire. It manufactures electronics and microchips for the Russian army. Local residents posted videos of the fire on social media. According to Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations, a warehouse building was burning and the roof collapsed. Special trains and drones were deployed to extinguish the fire and monitor the situation. By the way, the distance from Novosibirsk to the Ukrainian border is more than 3,500 kilometers. So Ukrainian drones are striking oil refineries deep inside Russia, disabling processing facilities. The losses are already being estimated in the billions of dollars. This deepens the budget deficit, forces cuts to social programs, and causes fuel shortages, experts told correspondent Dmytro Shulja.
New strikes deep inside Russia. A Ukrainian drone struck a large oil refinery in Tyumen, near the city of Antipino, 2,000 kilometers from the border. It is likely that the drone hit a primary oil processing unit with a capacity of 7 million tons per year, according to expert Maxim Gadus. He says the facility is one of the large refineries that have recently become regular targets of Ukrainian attacks.
Russia has 38 large refineries. At least one of them has been hit in Astrakhan. The second group consists of plants that are located far away and are very large. For example, on the 4th of October, on Saturday, the Tishleniki plant was shelled. This is in the Leningrad region. It is the second largest plant in the European part of Russia by capacity. It produces about 7 million tons, which is 5% of gasoline and 7% of diesel.
The geography of the strikes is expanding. Drones are reaching deep into Russia. Moreover, some plants and stations have been hit by Ukrainian drones more than once.
In Leningrad Oblast, in Tyumen, in Bashkortostan, we've hit them several times. The point here is not just about the variety of locations, but about striking those very facilities, those refineries that are the largest, the ones that account for 6, 7, or even 8% of annual oil processing.
From January to August, energy revenues dropped by 20%. These are the official figures from the Russian Ministry of Finance. Ukrainian experts say that the Russian budget deficit is growing due to difficulties in selling fuel.
In 8 months, that is, as of September 1st, the deficit is 4.2 trillion rubles. The Russian government is aiming to cut spending. One of the items they want to cut is the damper. This is a subsidy to fuel distributors to cover the difference between global prices and the prices at which they sell fuel in Russia.
The economic crisis is forcing Russia to cut back on infrastructure projects. Currently, they are primarily reducing long-term programs planned for decades ahead.
There will be cuts to many social programs, and this idea that's being discussed, that the state should pay pensions, this could be affected. The options currently on the table are to stop paying pensions and to cut benefits. It's no secret that in Russia, more and more businesses are switching to a 4-day work week instead of the traditional 5-day week. In other words, people are earning less. There is also talk about the possibility of nationalizing citizens' money in Russian banks. The amount in question ranges from 56 to 73 trillion rubles.
Bloomberg reports that due to Ukrainian strikes, Russia's oil refining has dropped below 5 million barrels per day, the lowest level since April 2022. At the same time, exports have increased by 500,000 barrels. According to experts, Russia can sell its raw materials to China and buy finished fuel.
How much exactly does Russia currently earn by selling its crude oil and then subsequently buying back what it could have easily refined and sold itself, thereby profiting significantly from the entire process itself? And
China will supply this essential oil to Russia as refined gasoline without any significant discount. If things turn out this way for Russia, it will mean even greater losses for them, and the budget deficit will only grow further.
Due to problems with their own refining, the Russian army is experiencing local fuel shortages. A strike hits a region with troops and there's no fuel there. At the same time, experts emphasize the Russian army is given priority in supply.
The army will be supplied first and foremost. No matter how much fuel is produced in Russia, the army has always had it. The second priority is the railway. Supplying it is also a priority. Next come industry and business.
Drivers are at the very bottom of the list. Even the regions of the Russian Federation are ranked by priority. Supply to Moscow is stable. Experts note this. In Yekaterinburg, however, limits have been introduced: 30 liters of gasoline and 70 liters of diesel per person. and prices are rising.
That's about 70 to 80 Russian rubles per liter. That's very, very expensive for ordinary Russians because they are simply not accustomed to such high prices at all.
According to former British intelligence officer Philip Ingram, strikes on fuel infrastructure are a key part of the war. Ukrainian experts emphasize this. A real result can only be achieved by combining further strikes with new sanctions against Russia.
It is expected that there will be tougher procedures regarding the detention of ships and the shadow fleet, which numbers about 30 tankers. But these are also sanctions targeting both individuals and legal entities, as well as the impossibility of goods entering Russia that are not related to the oil and gas sector, but which play an important role in the normal life of the state.
The fuel shortage is noticeable not only in Russia, but also in the temporarily occupied territories, particularly in Crimea. There is almost no A95 grade fuel at gas stations. The Russian head of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, admitted the shortage of I-95 and A-92 in September. The fuel shortage has already affected more than 20 regions of the Russian Federation and the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Dmitro Shulha, TV channel Rada, for the results of Yedyny Novyny.
Lines are growing and the gasoline is of poor quality. The fuel crisis in temporarily occupied Crimea continues. In an attempt to somehow overcome it, the occupation authorities began importing defective batches. After refueling engines stall, cars won't start and prices are rising. Popular fuel brands are not available on the peninsula. Our correspondent Karina Podlinko contacted a resident of Crimea and learned more about the fuel crisis that the occupiers are trying to hide. What is going on with you here? I can't understand. What kind of life is this? What is this?
There is fuel panic on the peninsula, lines at gas stations stretch for kilometers, and gasoline prices are rising despite the promises of the occupation authorities to freeze them.
This year, the price has already crossed the threshold of 83 rubles per liter. This is higher than the restrictions that have been imposed. In other words, administrative measures are not working, and on the coast of the Crimean Peninsula, out of 22 gas stations, only 5 are operating daily. This situation is typical for the entire peninsula.
Due to the fuel shortage, not only are private cars coming to a halt, but trucks are also at risk, which threatens the supply of food and medicine. Public transport is also affected.
The main thing this week, on September 30th, a brick cost 30 rubles, and today, October 5th, it's already 40.
In general, all essential services and critical deliveries, their operational plans are completely disrupted, and consequently, they cannot operate as they usually would. There is also this everyday mobility.
While the occupation authorities assure that the situation is under control, residents of Crimea see a different reality: lines, ration cards, and false promises. In particular, restrictions on the sale of fuel continue to be in effect on the peninsula. If at the end of September they were giving out 30 liters, then at the beginning of October this amount was reduced to 20.
Well, by the end of the week, they'll be selling gasoline by the glass. 10 liters is the next limit for every 100 kilometers.
We got in touch with the resident of temporarily occupied Crimea. He told us what the real situation with gasoline is on the peninsula, and for safety reasons. We are altering his voice.
Actually, I'm just using my very own personal reserves.
I'm using my own reserves. Just recently I went to a gas station to see how things are for ordinary people, but honestly it's not very cheerful. There's a huge line, so you have to plan your trip to the gas station in advance. On weekends, sometimes you have to stand in line the whole day. There are coupons, though I haven't actually seen them myself, but everyone talks about them. They say it's like it was under Khrushchev. Everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others, because they're already selling these coupons. Of course, some are real and some are fake. As a result, you end up like a fool. You bought these coupons, you stand in line all day, you finally get to the counter and they tell you, this coupon is fake, leave now or we'll call the police.
Our interlocutor adds that problems with fuel in Crimea started a long time ago. Even before the full-scale invasion, the peninsula was living under sanctions and isolation. Now, the situation is only getting worse.
Gasoline in Crimea has always been more expensive.
Gasoline in Crimea has always cost more than in Russia. They say it's because of logistics, but in reality, we all understood perfectly well that it was because of the sanctions. And now every other day there's news. Something's burning, there's a fire almost every day, and as a result, prices keep going up. And the more prices go up, the easier it is to set any price you want, you know? And another thing is that it simply doesn't exist physically.
But this process was accelerated, specifically by our strikes on the oil refining complex.
And even if gasoline is brought in, people don't get the full amount, or they get fuel of questionable quality. That's what residents of the peninsula are complaining about in local social media groups.
It actually used to be 20 liters.
Before, 20 liters would never fit into half a tank. But just recently I poured in 20 liters and it fit. And my fuel gauge wasn't even at the end yet. You need to file a report with the police. Let them measure it. Let them do something. Because now everything has just been swept under the rug. And they do whatever they want. Even if we buy gasoline for 80 rubles, at least do it properly. Soon they'll be filling us up not with gasoline or diesel, but with some kind of water.
I filled up.
Filled up with 95 Ultra just a few days ago, and what happened? My check engine light came on. Every time someone fills up there, this problem comes up.
In order to effectively get around the existing restrictions on 92-octane gasoline, for example, many gas stations typically take 92-octane fuel and then carefully add various specialized additives to it, thereby enhancing its properties and performance. And suddenly they have 100-octane gasoline, so that's their trick.
Crimea is effectively cut off from stable supplies. Russia can't even provide fuel for its own regions. The occupation authorities are hiding the true scale of the problem, while local bloggers are preparing the population. There is even more of a catastrophe ahead. We need to cut back on our own consumption.
We need to reduce our driving habits because it seems we're heading into a very severe fuel shortage. I don't see any point in relying on official sources. We need to rely on the real situation. If they start hitting not only the oil refineries but also the gas compressor stations and substations, we might end up having to rely on firewood and branches.
They will launch a bunch of inspections at gas stations, and that means it will paralyze the work of gas stations even more. And at the price they're being asked to sell it, they won't sell. Judging by everything, this is the beginning of a crisis.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense forces continue to impose sanctions. And not only on oil terminals and refineries in Russia, but also on those in temporarily occupied Crimea. For example, for the second time this week, drones have attacked the largest oil terminal in Feodosia. The first time, the occupation authorities blamed the fire on welding work. This time, they are silent. Karina Podlinkova, Dimverba, Rada TV channel for the main single summary.